Yeah, everything's all good.
All right. Well, I appreciate you guys' patience just playing around with my audio settings and all, trying to get things set properly. So, anyways, welcome. We're obviously, again, still waiting on a few people, so I don't want to jump in just yet. I want to give a minute or two to anybody else who plans on joining. But this is our first training session for Pygame Level 1. Really we'll go through the Pygame course in general. There's 2 levels, but I'll be taking questions and we'll demo the first lesson of the course, and we'll kind of go through the general course structure, and I'll give you guys some points and resources, and again, just be kind of handing out information and taking questions if you have any. So, have either of you guys taught classes here at AI003 Learning before, or is this all new to you guys, or where are you at in the process?
I've taught for me personally. I've taught like more than 2 Scratch AI classes, and I've already been evaluated to teach Java and Python.
Okay, sweet.
And I'm still waiting on the process of getting evaluated to teach C++.
Yeah, I think we're getting that taken care of. There's obviously something going on there. I think that I think again it's a newer course. We're getting trying to get teachers, get evaluators, and everything else together. And there's been a lot of renovations with the actual process of doing evaluations and scheduling and all of that in the last some months. So we have like new systems for it, and they're working pretty well, but it's just kind of a matter of getting everything, everything up to speed. I should say too, my name is Andre. I am the creator of the Pygame course. I'm the main teacher of it right now. Obviously, we're looking for more teachers, and so if you guys ever have any questions on the course, I guess I'm kind of the main guy to ask about it. Like I said, we don't really have anybody else right now. It's a new course. It's just come together. We've had the whole Pygame as kind of part of the curriculum for a while, but this is a new curriculum that I'm designed. So we've got all new lessons and all kinds of stuff, and I've taught it a couple times now, and it seems fun. So that again is why we're doing this today, so I can fill you guys all in on what we've got for Pygame and again, how I would recommend you teach the course. I'm seeing a couple people coming in and out, so I'm hesitant in getting started, but I guess we got to start eventually. So I wanted to kind of just start out with some background information on the Pygame engine itself, and so that's what I want to take a look at here. Just a second. So this is the main web page for the Pygame engine, for the Pygame library. I guess I should say, so essentially, you guys, there's a lot of different game engines out there. Pygame is a game engine, And if you're unfamiliar with the concept of game engines, essentially, it is a tool for building games. It has all kinds of functions. There's lots of different engines out there. Pygame is not any kind of complex physics engine or anything like that. It's a very simple engine overall, but that again is why we use it. To kind of teach the introduction of computer graphics and everything. Um, Pygame is mostly for 2D development, though it is possible to do 3D, because 2D is in 3D are essentially the same thing. 3D is just drawing the shapes a little differently, so it's 3D. It's mostly built for 2D though, so that's really what we get into in this course. If you guys have some ideas for 3D games and ways that you want to go about doing it, go ahead and try and challenge yourselves and challenge the class, but do it at your own discretion. Again, most of the projects that I do in the class, and most of what Pygame was designed for is 2D games, but there's a lot that you can have fun with in that. And so I'll show you guys some of the projects I've made in classes with Pygame, and then some of the other things you guys can get involved with. Some of the things you can have fun with in Pygame. It's been around for a long time, so that's another reason why it's a cool engine to use for this, because there's tons and tons and tons of information on how to use it in all different ways, different operating systems, using it with different modules and, to do various things. There's always lots of examples online on how to use it, but then again, I also have lots of examples that I provide in the course on how to do various things. But two, this is a huge resource for you guys. This is the official Pygame documentation that holds all that you will need to know about the library. So this is a good thing for you guys to have around. I like to give it to the students so that they have access to it. Because obviously there's many functions, even though it is still a simple engine. There are, there's sprites and there's a number of different classes, a number of different aspects of Pygame that we can use. They even have you can even use a joystick to control games. They actually have built-in tools for that, so that's kind of fun. But all in all, you guys can explore this and find different ways. There's many ways of going about using the Pygame engine, and that again is why the documentation is really useful, because it gives you lots of different routes you can take. Welcome. How's it going? So again, this is pygame.org/docs. This is the official Pygame documentation. This is going to have everything you guys need to know about the Pygame engine, or at least the basics. Always come back here if you have any questions. And then, of course, again, for more advanced topics, when you have specific questions on how to use the engine to do specific things, there's many resources online. You can usually guess that when you're trying to do something, somebody has tried to do something similar before, and there's probably a number of different threads on problems that you might run into and how to get around them. Again, Pygame, simple engine, 2D engine, lots of resources, lots of documentation. It's been around for a long time, very popular. So all good to know as far as actually using the engine. Now I wanted to show you guys a few examples here of Pygame projects and of some of the things that we do in the course, just so you guys can get an idea of what Pygame is capable of. This is often something I like to start out with before we get into just the plain code, You know, I like to show the students in the beginning of the class some actual projects I've made, projects other people have made, and just so they can get an idea of what they're learning and, you know, again, what they can actually do with it as they get better. So here's one. Here is actually, this is the first game I ever made with Pygame. And you can see here I've got a game menu, you know, just a basic launcher. And so then I've got a few buttons in there, and I can select my difficulty, and I can select how many enemies I want to fight, and then I can hit begin and I can start the game. There we go. And so you can see fairly basic. You know, like I said, this was the first game I made with Pygame, and it was just kind of learning how to do animations. And I went about animations the hard way, and basically everything I did in this project was I did the hard way. But it was still fun. It still wasn't too difficult, and you know, I eventually got it done. So I just wanted to show you that one real quick to start. Come back to this one. You know, Pygame is cool too, you guys, because there's many things we can do with it. And that's also something I advertise about the course is that, you know, beyond just games, it is a graphical engine, which means that we can do all kinds of things just with graphics. If you want to make interesting animations or designs or whatever else, as you can see here, this is another thing. This is one I'd like to do in the very beginning part of the game or part of the course where we're learning about RGB color codes and drawing circles. And this is all we're doing here. We're drawing a circle and changing the size and the color of it. And you can see that can get pretty interesting. And so, you know, there's lots of different stuff we can do in that. And that's again why I say the Pygame is a game engine, obviously, but it's a graphics engine. There's many more things that we're able to do with it beyond just you know, beyond just games. Once you guys get the hang of the engine, though, you'll see that there's tons and tons of assets online. You know, like everything that you see here is just something I went on the internet and just pulled off real quickly, like the animations for the birds or the, you know, this animated GIF that I used to make an animation for the torch, or we have this, you know, the sky with the twinkling stars or the background picture in the woods, and then obviously I added some shading. Well, you can see there's all kinds of things you can do, and I was able to throw this together in, you know, half an hour or something short, just you know, again, just grabbing some assets and just throwing them together. So another example of just some fun things you could do with the engine. But as I said, we start off small, you know, and we work up to all this stuff. There's obviously you know, just like any other program, things can get as complicated as you want, or they can be as short, as simple as you want. And we can do all kinds of interesting things with Pygame while keeping the programs fairly short and simple. And that's another cool thing about the engine too. You know, many other engines they involve a lot of other complex aspects to them, but Pygame tries to keep it pretty simple. I want to talk a little more about animations later on. We'll get back to that. Here's one worth showing too. This is a game that I've just recently started working on. This is an idea I had for a puzzle game that I could throw together. Once again, using Pygame, just grab a bunch of images online, and we could actually put them together in various ways. Once again, just trying to give you guys an idea of what's possible with the Pygame engine. Once you get the hang of it, you know, you'll find that there's all kinds of interesting things you can do, and it can be a lot of fun. Here's one of the first games that we make, although this is a slightly different version of it. I've got a flaming ball here. But as you guys could imagine, creating a simple Pong game was one of the first popular video games, and you know, is a great place for us to start, because it's, you know, it's not so difficult. You know, there's nothing really much simpler, and it teaches us the basics here, where we have, you know, somewhat of an animated kind of figure, the paddle, and then the ball itself, and actually keeping track of the positions and the collisions and everything else is a great simple lesson in the beginning of the course, um, you know, to teach them important essential skills. Trying to clear out some of the way here. I'll show you this one as well. Obviously, you know, there may be many times where you want to put things together in Pygame, and it you know, it takes a lot to build assets, to build, you know, or to like draw out things, to create animated sprites and other things like that. But you'll find that many times, especially when you're doing things like simple particle effects, just using shapes and other things like that can really handle a lot of situations. So here you can see I just used circles to draw a whole bunch of raindrops, and circles to draw up a cloud or two. And so we have clouds and rain all drawn with various sized and colored circles, moving at different speeds. So just another idea for things you can do with the engine. Yeah, Pong is a great place to start, and you know, that's something too. I'll show you guys once you guys you know, and I'm glad actually I just remembered, I almost forgot to show you guys this one here. I remembered, I forgot. There's another game here that I like to make with the class, but as you guys can see, the very beginning, you know, you make something like Pong, but then once you go through the whole Pong thing, then you can start to take a look at you know, a step up from there, and you can actually bring in some images and other things, and then you can actually build this, which works off of the exact same functional code. But you can see now we've actually got air hockey, and I don't know if you guys can hear it, but there's like a jazz music. There's a jazz track that's playing underneath the whole thing. But again, the only difference here between the Pong that you guys saw is that we used images here. We didn't just use regular shapes. And so, you know, this is something that I like to do early on, where we take a look at collisions, we take a look at drawing and other things like that. And then once they get kind of the basics, then we can actually start bringing in images, and you can see how just a couple images alone can make your very simple plain Pong game into actually a more of a complete project. And then again, adding music and other things like that too, you know, can obviously improve the whole thing as well. But that's the air hockey, which again is just simply the Pong code with images. Probably one of the first games I would recommend you guys make in the course, you know, after the Pong. the first real game, I could say. But once again, you know, there's many other things you guys can do beyond just games with the Pygame engine. You know, and one of the things that me and a class have been working on is we've actually been working on this, which is a simple pixel app. And you can see here, so I can actually come in and I can draw, and you know, I can draw whatever I want. Maybe I want to draw some ugly stick man. But you know, then we can also we choose to fill the screen with a color if we want. Or I can come up here and I can actually select a different color using this color pad we made. Can turn the grid lines on and off. I can choose to fill an area with a color. I can select a color here, and then fill an area with a color. You know, all kinds of different things like that. So anyways, you can see here, this is just a simple simple tool. Oh, and then we also have a save and a load function if I want to load or save an image. So once again, you know, another example, you can use Pygame in all sorts of ways. That's a simple pixel app, a pixel drawing app that actually allows you to draw and then actually come up with a drawing and then save that drawing as a PNG file. And you know, that's not anything too difficult to put together either. So another example, some fun stuff you can do with the engine. You guys will find, though, there are some challenges to working with Pygame. And one of those things that that you get into later in the course is animations. Animations can be a challenge because, well, you know, you have to go about it a few different ways. You either are planning on actually loading in individual files to then actually use as individual animation frames, or you have to use what's called a sprite sheet. And with a sprite sheet, you guys, with a sprite sheet, you essentially you have multiple frames all within one image, and so that can be a really efficient way of loading things, because then, you know, let's imagine you've got 10 different animations, and each of those animations has, you know, 8 to 10 frames in it, and you know, so there's like 100 frames. And if you could load that all in on one single image rather than 100 different images, it's less code you have to write. It's faster for the engine. It's faster not just on the initial load, but then actually working with it later on. You know, there's just all kinds of advantages to it, and it's a lot less image editing you have to do rather than actually trying to edit each one of those individual frames. I've been through it, no fun. So then, though, a sprite sheet, I'll show you guys what that is in a second if you don't know. Those can have their own complications with working with them. And so I actually have a tool that I've made for working with the sprite sheets. But then I also have another tool here that I wanted to show you guys, which, you know, which allows you to create menus and other things like that. Here, let me show you for a second. Yeah, Pygame does not have any built-in GUI elements, you guys. Pygame is kind of about just leaving it all up to you. You know, that's the whole idea. It's very simple, and so everything that we want to do, you know, there's plenty of built-in functions, but as far as buttons and text boxes and you know, you see I've got this basic slider here. Things like this, they don't actually have anything built in for that in Pygame. So you can find all kinds of different GUI classes, or you know, you could probably find something that somebody else has made. Maybe you could find something better than mine. But this is just something simple I put together. These are obviously very ugly looking buttons, but you guys can style them more, and you can actually make things that don't look too bad. I could try and find an example here. Yeah, actually, let me show you. it may also be a question that you have at some point from a student is how you can actually take one of these Python files and then actually turn it into an application. And so here's one using Py installer. I've actually taken a Pygame project I made and then turned it into an application. And I write a little bit about that in the in the files for the course, and I'll share those with you guys. It's a bit of a process though. But here's a game that I made with the class that I called Skull's Eternity, and it is about a wolf that jumps across the sky forever, chasing the sun. So you can see here, we've got a few different things. We've got tracers and we've got birds and animations, but the one reason I wanted to, again, open this up was so you guys could see we're using my GUI tool here. So if you guys wanted to be able to make some menu buttons that look something like this, or make a slider that looked like this, you can actually use my GUI tool to do that. Again, it's fairly basic, but you can see you can put some nice looking stuff together and you can make it work for your situation. I'll also provide resources on that. So that's a bit of background on the Pygame engine. I wanted again to just show everybody, some of the things we can do, some of the projects I've made, some of the projects we'll actually make in the course, so you guys can get an idea of what's involved. Of course, a lot of these projects are, more of demos and other things and things I've worked on for a while, but there's plenty there too that you guys will be able to go through yourselves and to even teach in your own classes. Game development can obviously be challenging. Working with the coordinate systems has its upsides and its downsides. It can be a lot of fun, but it can also be very technical. And so, again, some students are going to take to that better. I guess was what I was getting at is I teach my classes based on the actual course. As far as all of these files here, you guys may not get into everything that I've shown here, but there are a few major takeaways that you should focus on for the course, and that is really the basics of working in a XY coordinate system. That you add on the X to go to the right, or you add or subtract from the Y to change your your vertical position. Essentially then being able to manipulate images, being able to load in images and do basic edits like resizing the image. That's really the main thing, or say like maybe cropping the image. And then beyond that, it's animations. Those are like the three big takeaways in level 1. It's learning basic coordinate systems and working with the coordinate system, learning how to work with images and shapes and other things in the library, and then learning the basics of creating animations. Those are the takeaways for the course, you guys. If you're going to teach anything, that would be it. The idea really for level 1 is that the students can get a really good sense of how to work with the library, that you guys can build a couple games together, and then once they graduate from that onto level 2, then they can really take the reins into their own hands and start actually building their own games, and then you can assist them with that. That's the idea behind level 2. And then of course you can continue to teach them about other more advanced aspects of the library, and assist them in whatever it is that they are interested in creating, of course with some maybe restrictions based on the time constraints and other things. That's the general idea though, you guys, for the course. So if there's no questions, I'm going to keep going. Obviously, if you guys have any questions, throw them in the chat, or just feel free to speak up. But what I want to do next, again, is I want to demo the first lesson. And then I guess I should also show you guys the a little bit about the actual course files, so you know what you need to get the first lesson going. This is the curriculum folder. I'll make sure to share this with you guys, or in one way or another, you should have all these docs shared with you, probably most likely through ThinkLand rather than just by these means. But essentially, everything in here, you guys, is everything you'll need to teach the course. You can see we have a list of assignments, a general outline for the course, and here's a plan actually for the demo lesson. And this also kind of goes along with what you guys would do in your evaluation, where essentially you're going to be teaching the first lesson, which is on opening up a Pygame window and then creating the bouncing ball program, which is a simple program for Pygame. You can kind of think of it like your like Pygame Hello World is making the bouncing ball program. So again, that's the demo lesson, and that's also the evaluation is the bouncing ball program, and we'll go over that together here in just a minute. Here is a kind of run through of the general course structure. As we've been talking about, this is kind of dependent on how your class is going. I don't recommend that you guys follow this to a T if it's not working for you. Do what works best for your class. But I think more or less so this should be a pretty good outline for you guys to follow. When you come into the course, you can start out with a general review section before you start talking about actual Pygame. You can just make sure that everybody understands Python data types and like if statements and math operators and while loops, for loops, functions, basic things like that. If you have a level 3 class that is coming into Pygame, then obviously you might want to review like classes and other things if you want to use that in your code. But then unit 1 will just really be all about getting the kids used to opening up a Pygame window and opening up loading in various shapes and images and moving them around the screen and other things like that. There are other functions, again, you can find in the Pygame documentation, like the draw lines, draw polygon function. Those are also ones you guys can show them. I recommend you start out with just like drawing circles and drawing rectangles, because that alone, there's tons and tons you can do with just that. And I think that in itself is going to teach them all they need to know about the coordinate systems that then would allow them to use the draw lines and draw polygon function. It might just be a little confusing at first. So that's again what I say is focus on basics, drawing of shapes, and then move on to drawing images and resizing and moving images around and things. And then for the general structure of the course after that, you just kind of continue on through the lessons. Once your class can load in images and basic shapes, you can start to go over key controls, and so you can actually then utilize your keyboard and your mouse to control the various aspects of your program, like the movement of objects, or maybe the color of things, all kinds of stuff. And so then, as you can imagine, once you have images loaded in, once you have shapes, once you have key controls, once you know how to create a basic Pygame window and do all of the essentials, then you can start looking into this idea of animations. And so once again, animations is kind of a tricky one, and we're going to talk a little more about that in just a minute. The next unit after that is collision detection. And so that's essentially, detecting if you have a square here and a square here, and the two sides of those squares touch, that is a collision. And so, that's really basic math. If this square is, 100 pixels wide, and this square is 100 pixels wide, and, this one's at, 100x, and this one's at, 150x, then obviously, they're going to be overlapping. So it's generally pretty basic math to figure collisions out in a 2D space. But it's really good stuff to go through with the students very thoroughly, and do lots of different demonstrations. This again is where the whole Pong game really comes in. You spend a lot of time with going back over the Pong and other examples like that, to really simplify and clarify the whole process of doing collisions. I have a few other, kind of like example programs, like for doing collisions with multiple objects, doing collisions on, in more advanced ways. Some of these files are old. Some of them you don't have to worry too much about. That again, the extent to which you guys get into the collision unit is really going to depend on your class. I would focus a lot more on just the basics of working with the coordinate systems and animations and shapes and things. And if your class is like stellar at that, then get as technical and complex as you want. But then once the kind of the conclusion to the whole collisions unit would then be actually taking that animated character that you made from unit 1 and then actually connecting the two together. So now you have a animated character that then you can actually sense the collisions with objects. That really is a big thing, and it takes a lot to put that together. But once you get to that point, that's a huge step in actually then being able to create games. And so the final really unit 3 is very simple. So you can take your time, or you can just go quick. It's really whatever is feeling best at this point. What unit 3 is all about is sound, music, and creating custom text displays. So that can also include maybe a little bit about creating game menus, and that's maybe where you could also introduce how to use my GUI class. Once again, that'll all be up to you guys and how your course is going. But then the final part of the course, a good place to end. I like to try and leave, maybe the last 4 classes at least, to try and work on something. Maybe you can do maybe more, maybe less. Again, depending on your class, depending on the projects you want to take on. Don't try and take on anything too big right before the end of the course. Give yourself plenty of time to come down from the project and to review it afterwards. But essentially this is the final unit of the course, and if you had really advanced students who were really interested, they might then actually want to start trying to build their own games at this point. But I can tell you, even in a more advanced class, it's generally the case that at this point you are going to want to really take hold of the wheel. There's probably not a whole lot more time left in the course, and you want to give some good concluding project. And so that's where you can start to take a look at this folder here, where I do have some games, and I have a couple in here, but I'm going to add some more very soon here. But once again, you have the air hockey game, or here is a mountain racer game that I made with the class at one point. Then again, you've got the basic Pong, but you can obviously do lots more with that if you wanted. Then there again is a I've got the there's a checkers game in here. I'm also going to place, there's like I said, there's a couple others I've made recently with classes that I'll throw in here as well. But point being is there's all kinds of different small projects you guys can throw together pretty quickly with Pygame that can act as a good conclusion to the course. And so that again is unit 4. That's really where you want to end. Once you have animations, collisions, making a basic window and loading shapes and things, you know, and then you now know how to do music and sound effects and, you know, customize text. Now they have everything they need to actually make games. So now it's really time to get creative. And so that's again where you can see how that leads into level 2 of the course, where we really just start just creating games. Like we get right into level 2 and we just start building games. And you know, it's a lot of fun. So once again, any questions, throw them out there. But if not, I am now going to demonstrate the first lesson. And along with that, I'm also going to show you guys the presentation here. I should say, I think a lot of courses, they've got like, you know, 50 different presentations and they've all got like, you know, a couple different frames in them. And, you know, for each different lesson or maybe for each different unit. I didn't do that, you guys, because we're working with a graphics engine, you know, so I don't really see the reason for having all of the graphics here when you have code, when you have actually the ability to create graphics with Python. Much more interesting, much more relevant to the class. So I recommend you guys spend as much time in your text editors coding, looking at Pygame code, or even just looking at examples of Pygame projects as possible. You know, I don't really recommend that you spend lots and lots of time just in here in the presentation, but there is a number of different things here that you guys can use to kind of guide yourselves and guide your class as you go through here. You know, so you can see once again, we just kind of lay out the basics of the course. You know, what is the Pygame, basic projects you guys could show off or check out. You know, here's the examples folder, the documentation, and then we go over the course overview, you know, review section. And again, kind of explain animations. Here we kind of actually talk about animations and explain some of the details on how they work and some examples of how you can think about it. This again is where we go into the sprite sheet, where you guys can see this is what a sprite sheet looks like. Where again you can imagine how this is a huge advantage compared to what we talked about. The other option is that you would have 50 different animation frames. This is 50 different pictures of Link, all in a different pose, so that we can use these for animations, and each row is an animation. But this entire thing is actually just one image, so we can load it in super fast. It's super easy to edit and work with. And Pygame can also work with it really, really fast. And again, it's all just one image. And so compare that to working with 50 individual images that you would have to edit individually and move around and load in individually. And then Pygame would have to work with them individually. It's just be a way, way slower process. This is much, much faster, much smoother. So that's how you want to do animations, is with sprite sheets. And you can see the way that works is essentially, you know, you say that you want to break down, you know, such and such a row. And so you grab that row. And so you would basically divide the height of the screen, you know, by however many rows there were. So, you know, in this case, there's 8 rows. So we divide the height of the screen by 8 to then get the size of one row. And then we can divide the width of the screen by 10 to get the size of one single frame, the width of one frame. And then we can just grab that, that sized rectangle at different positions, and we can grab the frame out of the sprite sheet. And you don't have to do that individually. You can just use a for loop to do it, and it's actually not too difficult. Once again, I have a tool for it, and I'll be showing you guys how to use. It really makes the process super fast, super easy. So, usual thing, just as I said before, go through, teach about collisions, teach about animations, all of that. And then here's a little information on actually turning your program into an application using Py-installer. But again, I was just jumping back over here just to say that you guys can use this as a resource in the class. But I highly recommend that you utilize the graphics that you can generate with Pygame to make your class interesting. And that way your students spend lots more time looking at Pygame code, learning Pygame code, rather than being elsewhere. So without further ado, let's make a bouncing ball. Now, before I actually make the bouncing ball, I like to go through the process of just actually loading up a Pygame window. So, I would say import Pygame, and we can simply load in the Pygame library just like that. And so when you load in the Pygame library, it's recommended you do it just like that. Bring in the whole library. Of course, you can also import it as PG, or I often do it as PYG. It's just what I've gotten used to. But then the next step you have to do is you have to initialize the Pygame library. And what this function does is that this brings in all of the dependencies for the Pygame library and gets those all ready. So then once we've brought in all of our other dependencies, once we have the Pygame library, then we can create our screen variable. And so you guys can call this W for window, or you can call it screen, or whatever you want. I'm going to call it W because that's really short and simple, easy to type, hard to forget. And then we can say pygame.display.set mode. And this is an important function that you call at the beginning of your whole program. You can see once we've actually imported the game, imported the library, imported the rest of the dependencies. Now what this function does is this actually starts the video system. And this is also then where you can set your screen size. And so you can set it to something standard like 600 by 400, or you can actually give it 00, and then it will actually detect your screen size and make a full size window. I'm going to go for 600 by 400 for now. And then we can just run that there, and you guys can see that, of course, once we save the file, like I said, I'm used to typing in PYG, Pygame. There we go. And you can see we got absolutely nothing, but we got a window that is 600 by 400 pixels. And it crashed because we don't have any kind of event loop going. So you can see that's nothing too difficult. And then once you have the window, you're actually now ready to start drawing things to it. There's nothing else you have to do. That's it. So now let's say I wanted to draw a circle in the center of the screen. And so we can simply say that. I can say pygame.draw.circle. And then we can say that I want to draw that circle. I want to draw it on the screen. That's the first variable I'm going to give it, where I actually want to draw it. And then I want to say it's going to be a blue circle. And then we'll place it at, well, again, I want to get the center of my screen here. So there's a number of ways you guys could do that, but the way I would recommend you get used to and teach your students to do it is you would say it like this. You would say xy equals w dot get size. So you can actually get the size of your window, and then you could save that to x and y. And then we could just simply come down here and say x divided by 2 and y divided by 2. And as you could imagine, x divided by 2, that's your total width of your screen. So half of that is going to be the center. So then half of the height is also going to be the center. So we can simply divide x and y by 2 and get the perfect center of the screen. And then the final variable, the final argument for the circle function is we draw the radius. We have to set the radius for the circle. I was almost forgetting the word. So the radius we can just set to like 10 pixels or something like that. And then we can load that up. And once again, you guys will notice that we got absolutely nothing. And this is normal. This is a good thing, actually, because as you can imagine, Pygame has to go through lots and lots of processes for drawing. The way that the drawing works in any regard, you know, the way that computer graphics works, you guys, is that we draw single pixels, you know, going across our screen in rows to actually create the shapes and other things. So you can imagine if Pygame, every single time you asked it to draw a shape, went onto your screen and actually went and drew that shape, it'd be really wearing itself out, because, you know, then you could imagine you could easily draw 5 different circles, draw them over the top of each other, and every single time it went through and it drew the circle, and you know, the first 4 were never seen, only the last one. And then, but it still took five times as much time to actually run the program. Might be a difficult thing to imagine in the beginning, but essentially, this is why you only want to call this line one time, but you have to call this line in order to see the updates. You call pygame.display.update. And what this does is this actually takes all of your requests. You know, we send a request to Pygame to draw a circle, and the update function then actually takes those requests and then runs them all. So once again, you could imagine that way, if we draw a whole bunch of shapes and some of them overlap each other, then Pygame can go through much more efficiently, draw the screen one time, and then just draw the picture as it was, you know, as we laid it out. Again, rather than drawing the same circle, you know, over itself 5 times and only seeing the outside one, but then still actually updating each time. It's a difficult thing to describe, but I think you guys you'll know what I mean when you accidentally do it incorrectly and your program isn't working. We'll give an example here in a minute. But I guess before I change this program here, let me run this so you can see then. With those 6 lines of code, we have now drawn a circle to the perfect center of our screen. And now we can actually begin making some changes to it. So of course, this isn't in any kind of a loop. This is just a straight program. So the program ran and it ended. So in order to actually add something more to this, to say if we wanted to make this ball bounce, we need to create a while loop. And as you can imagine, this is kind of a dangerous thing, because now this is running at the absolute maximum speed that Pygame is going to be able to run at. And so in order to then control that, you guys, we can actually set, using a line called pygame.time.delay. There's a few ways you can do this, but this allows you to set delay in milliseconds. And so you can do some simple math, you know, say 1,000 milliseconds is 1 second. So, you know, if you wanted to say get 30 frames per second, then you would just divide 1,000 by 30, which is roughly like, you know, 33. So there we go. We say pygame.time.delay 33 milliseconds, and that'll be roughly 30 frames per second. And so now that actually draws the ball to the screen every 30 milliseconds. But as you can imagine, it's still not really changing. So now in order to actually make the change happen, we have to move the position of the ball. And so that means that we can't have the position set as a constant value here. We need to set a POS variable. And so we can say POS equals, and then we can again say, you know, like maybe we want to start out with x and y divided by 2. And so you'll notice here, I'm actually going to use a list, because if I used a tuple, then I wouldn't be able to change it. This is where we really get into the whole difference between the list and the tuple. You know, oftentimes I think we kind of get by in either case, but here it's really important because we're going to be doing a lot of changes to this list. So if it was a tuple, we wouldn't be able to make any changes to it, and the whole program wouldn't work. So all we want to do now is we want to simply add a little bit to that position each time, so that way we can actually move the ball, or move the circle, I should say. So then we can say POS 0. So we can say POS 0, which is then, you know, this is a list, so think list index. So POS 0 is the first value. The X value, I should always put that. Anytime you're going to put a coordinate in Pygame, or really anywhere, you guys, it's always going to be X and then Y. Pretty standard stuff. But so we can say POS 0 plus equals 1. We could say something like that, and then we could say POS 1 plus equals 1. And we can run that, and now you guys can actually see that then this moves the ball, but now it's more like drawing a line. And you guys may know why this is, and this is because we haven't actually cleared the screen. This is also why I say that drawing animations is just like, it is exactly like creating a flip book, okay? Because as you can see here, this is an animation, really. Moving this ball is an animation, because we have to create multiple frames in order to actually see the ball moving. If we draw the ball on the same frame every single time, we get this, we get a line. Okay, we have to remove the old ball and then draw a new one in order to actually see movement. And so all we have to do is we would just say w.fill, and then we can fill the screen with a color. Maybe we can say black. And so now you can see we are actually moving the ball across the screen until it leaves the screen. And so once again, the goal here is that we get the ball to bounce, and we're just about there. All we would have to do in order to actually now stop the ball is we would, instead of moving it by a constant value, you see we're able to move the ball by removing the constant value of its position, but now we have to actually change the movement from this constant value. So we're going to now set a speed variable, and speed once again will be a list that will be the X speed and the Y speed. And so we can say 1, 1, and that again is X and Y. So it's going to move 1 on the X and 1 on the Y in the beginning, but then we can add a couple if statements. So we can say if POS plus speed is not in range. There's many ways you could say that, but you know, I like to do it this way. It works pretty well. It's fairly logical. So if POS is plus speed is not in range of, and I should say POS 0 plus speed 0 is not in range of 0 and the width of my screen, 600, then we would say POS 0 equals negative POS 0. So you can imagine if the ball goes over to hits the side of the screen, and now we see that adding more speed is going to actually move the ball off the screen. We're going to reverse the speed of the ball, start moving it the other direction. So that's what happens there. And then once again, same thing. If POS 1, if the ball's vertical position plus the ball's vertical speed is not in range of 0 and 400, the height of the screen, the height is actually at the bottom. Pygame, it starts at the top. The top left corner is 0, 0, and then it goes down and to the right. And so then we would say POS 1 equals negative POS 1. And then, as you can see now, we can load that, and the ball will move down to the bottom, and it will hit the bottom. And then once it hits, that was interesting. It got stuck. Let's see what I did wrong.
I think the speed was, yeah.
Right here. Isn't that, look at this. The speed's perfect. This is all perfect, but look at this. POS 0 plus 1, POS 1 plus 1. It's just still, and yeah, I also reversed the speed. So you guys can see that this is pretty simple stuff, but it's more often than not just silly mistakes like that that really get you. I just got the variables reversed. There we go. Speed 1. Okay, so we're reversing not the position. We don't want to reverse the position. We want to reverse the speed. That's what was going on there. And then we actually want to add the speed to the position each time. Now let's watch the ball bounce. Beautiful. So yeah, the coordinate systems are a lot of fun to work with. You can make some hilarious mistakes at times. I always take advantage of mistakes though. You know, I think anytime you make a mistake in your class in programming, it's just simply an opportunity for you to then explain why it is that the error that you created actually happened, you know, how it works, how you can prevent it, you know, so it can be a learning experience for everybody. But essentially, you can see that that is the whole program. It's a fairly short, simple program. You know, let's see. I'm going to just break this down here. We could even make these one-line if statements. So yeah, as you can see, it's a short program. You know, there's a little bit going on there, but once you have the basic understanding of the X and Y coordinate system, then, you know, you have the ability to do this. So once again, though, for you guys, this is, think of this like your hello world. Like this is your #1 go-to program for Pygame. You know, if you don't understand this, you know, the rest of the course is going to be difficult. I don't want to intimidate anybody with that because, again, Pygame is a heavily documented, you know, really popular, long time engine. You know, it's fairly easy to use. I didn't know that much about Pygame just a year ago. You know, I've learned a whole lot in recent months, in the last year. So, you know, once again, have faith in yourselves, have confidence. And if you guys ever have any questions on it, you can always ask. But once again, this is your hello world. You know, this is where you want to start. You want to make sure that you can do this program in your sleep, barring, you know, maybe a couple errors you run into here and there, as you can see I did. But you want to be able to build this, and you want to understand very well how it works, because again, everything else is built off this. This is the basics of animation. You can see you have to clear the screen each time. You know, we have to actually redraw the frame and you know, create the movement. We have to you know, here's our basics of checking for collisions and these if statements right here. We're using the actual delay here to control the overall game speed. You know, again, it's really important you guys understand how to update properly. And I guess the most simple way I can say it is you only want to call display.update one time per tick. If you call it even twice per tick, it's going to seriously slow down your game. You know, if you were to actually draw, like, you know, say like draw multiple shapes and then update after each one, you will see it goes crazy slow. You only need to update one time per you know, revolution or per tick. That's the best way I can say it. Also, you know, when you guys get to loading images in, make sure you do not load images in the while loop. If you're loading an image in 30 to 60 times per second, you know, just try and imagine it. It's going to be really, really slow. It's going to slow your whole program down. So same thing here. Any images, any variables, anything you need to do, try and do it all before you go into your game loop, and that'll help to make this whole process a lot faster. Even other math, you know, math equations that you can do outside the loop, you want to make sure you do all of those before you go into a while loop, or if you have like some kind of, you know, iterative process, some kind of for loop or something that was drawing a bunch of shapes, same thing, you know, try and do as much math outside of the loop as you can, so that then, you know, the whole loop runs faster. But then again, that is, this is the evaluation. This is the demo. This is the level 1 Pygame lesson 1 bouncing ball program. This is your hello world for Pygame. You know, this is where you guys want to start. Once you know this program, then creating things like actual games, actual animations, all of that really becomes within your grasp. And so that's the next part. I just wanted to show you guys briefly here before we go, or before I stop yabbering and give you guys a chance to ask some questions maybe. Just want to show you a couple other files here that'll be really, really key resources for anybody who is interested in either using the Pygame engine or actually teaching it. I really think that either case, you know, it's going to be very helpful to have these tools. So I just wanted to here it is. I wanted to bring up the animation example file here. I don't know what the heck I did with it. Oh, this is it. Okay, let's go with this one. So you guys, this is the process of creating animations in Pygame. And so this, as you can see, I've got lots and lots of comments in here explaining things, and I've kind of spread things out to try and you know, make it a little more readable. Obviously, there's there's a lot going on in here, so you guys will have to read through this and kind of take some time to make sure you understand it. But this, again, this is something you get into a little bit later in the course, and then also kind of, you know, based on your class, you know, to what extent you actually really get into this. but I wanted to just quickly explain the process of breaking down sprite sheets. Now, a sprite sheet, again, as you guys saw, is simply an image that has many different frames in it. And in order to break down a sprite sheet, the first thing you'll obviously have to do is to load in the sprite sheet. And so you can see in this file here, we initialize the Pygame library, we create the display, and then we actually load in the image. And once we have our image, then what we do is we actually, just as I showed before, in the in the file here, we take the size of the image, we take the height and the width of the overall image, and then divide it by the number of frames and then the number of rows, and then that actually gives us the size of one sprite. And so once we have the size of one sprite, then we're able to actually begin breaking down the rows into animations. And so the process of breaking down a row is really as simple as that. You know, we choose what row we want to break down. So if you want to break down row 0, then you say how many frames are in that row. And so you can see we do a for loop for the number of frames in the row. And then we start at the far left. So we set the position to 0 when we start, because we're grabbing the far left side of the image. And then if we want to grab the next frame, then we're going to move over the size of one frame. And when we're on the next frame, we move over the size of another frame. And in order to do that, we can set the position just by saying the width of one frame times I. And we can do the height of one frame times the row number to then actually always grab the correct position for each frame. And you can see we can use that simple short function there to then break down each row of the sprite sheet into an actual animation. It's not technically an animation yet. It's broken down into a list of rectangles. You know, what we're saving again is the position and the size of each of those frames. So that way that later on, using the play function here, then what we can do is we can actually draw the sheet, the sprite sheet, you know, at the sprite's position, and then we can actually we can play the animation, and then we can draw the frame of the animation that we're currently on, and we can use an animation progress variable to keep track of what frame of the animation we're on. And so this was just one example of how we could do animations. There's many ways you guys can go about it, but you can see here that it's functional, that it gives us a link character. We can use WASD to control it, or I guess I've just got side animation set, but then there's also a blinking animation that occasionally plays. And so that's a lot of work getting that all in there. That can take some time. I recommend you guys do yourselves go through this, and then also at least, you know, maybe one time go through it with your class so they can see how this actually works. But obviously doing that every single time you want to make a sprite is going to take a lot of time, and we don't have that much time in the course, and it'd be a little ridiculous anyways. So this is where I recommend then you guys use some of my tools. And so I'll start off here. I'll show you this one. This is a sprite class that I made, very simple, but what it allows for is it allows you to, you know, create animations easily from a sprite sheet. It allows you to set key controls. It allows you to crop the sprite. It allows you to move the sprite using the tool. You can also then set collisions, and then you can feed in objects that you want the sprite to collide with. So there's a lot of things actually that the tool here can handle. So you can see that this is an actually shorter program, and this does a lot more than the last one does. And so now you can see we've actually got we've got animations going in all 4 directions, and we have collisions with this rectangle here. And once again, you know, we can just simply feed in a list of rectangles to collide with, and the sprite will collide with all of them. And I did a halfway decent job, I think, of keeping it efficient. So it only collides with rectangles within a certain distance of it. And so, so you should be able to feed in like many rectangles before you really experience any serious lag from it. But then too, you know, again, this obviously looks like a lot, but as you guys can see here, I'll show you this other file. You can see it's actually a very simple tool to use. You know, imagine here, like I've got this sprite sheet that I wanted to break down, and it's a dragon. And so you can see here, I just simply load in Pygame, and I load up the sprite class. I create a sprite, and I create an animation. I can set the speed and other things. And then down here, we say dragon.controls to play that animation. And that's it. You know, that does it. That takes care of the whole thing for me. So now all I'll have to do is just simply play this, and you can see then there we go. This one. And so that obviously is a much shorter, simpler way to go about animations. As you guys can see clearly, there you have animations and about 3 lines of code. And this also then, you could use this to break down any number of sprites. You could use this to break down any size sprite sheet. You can resize the image right here. You can set the position. You can choose whether or not you want the sprite to be restricted to the screen. And then again, you know, you have all kinds of parameters you can set when you're actually creating each individual animation, and you can simply play the animations just by calling dragon.controls. So that is how I recommend you guys do animations later. Once you yourselves and once the students have seen kind of the general idea about how animations goes, you know, I think then it'll be fair to say, okay, we saw it, we did it, you know, let's move on to a little more efficient process. You know, most game engines have ways of creating sprites or creating animations or other things. It's much more simplified. So I really recommend you guys make use of the tool. And then, of course, if you ever have any issues with it or have any questions on using it, you know, I'm always around to take those questions, provide answers and resources. And so that's the last file here I have to show you guys, is just again the animation tool. Once again, you can see this one. Just had a couple of those files open. Okay, this is the one. And so this gets into then the using both the GUI class that I showed you, and also the sprite class. And so you guys can see here, I've got just a simple thing. If I wanted to create a bunch of obstacles, I can hit this button, and I can create a bunch of obstacles. And so here's just a good example of you guys of how you can, using the sprite class, you can just simply feed in a list of rectangles, and regardless of you know, what size they are, their position or whatever, the sprite class does a pretty good job of detecting those rectangles and then preventing the sprite from colliding with them. And again, you can set collisions. You can set a collision crop, so you can decide how exactly you want the sprite to be able to collide. You know, maybe you want it to be able to squeeze through small spaces like this. You know, maybe not. You can decide that. Also, again, setting parameters in the whole class. But there's just a general idea. And then also you can see here too, the GUI class involves a couple of different things. You know, you've got access to a text box here that you can use to actually type into if you wanted. You can actually you can use the slider here for various things. You know, there's buttons, and then of course there's the actual shader, which is what you see drawn over the screen. And so you guys can then actually play around with the shaders and set it to however you want. And you can see that changing the gradient on the shader can then make the whole thing a whole lot darker. Or maybe we can set it, you know, set it to a little bit brighter. Huh. So anyways, I'm just trying to cover all the bases here, you guys, and make sure that I give you everything that you'll need to know so that you can see, you know, what this Pygame course is all about, you know, what really I expect from you guys. And, you know, again, just want to provide all of the resources you would need to actually get it done. I'll say that one more time. You know, I am not a master of Pygame and all of that. You know, I've been working with it for long enough now. I can build some games and other things, and you know, I have a background in a bit of game development. So, you know, working with the engine for me hasn't been too big of a deal, but it's been a learning process certainly. And you know, I wouldn't you know, count that out certainly. But once again, anything you guys ever have, any questions you have, any resources you need, I am always more than happy to provide them. You know, I'm just interested in keeping the course growing and you know, promoting it doing well. So at this point, well, what questions do you guys have? I think I've shown you a lot, probably thrown a lot of information your way. Is anybody unclear on anything at this point? Does anyone have any questions for me on particularly using the engine, any of the projects, anything at all?
One question. Wait. So, in have you personally given like Pygame documentation to any of the students you've taught?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I share the documentation with them, you know, and I kind of you know, sometimes I'll even try and challenge them. I'll try and tell them to that they can use, you know, they can use only the documentation as a resource, because obviously the documentation itself can be a little complex, and sometimes it's a really great resource, but other times, you know, for some of the students it can be a little tough to read through.
Okay. All right. Gotcha.
But I definitely would recommend giving it to all your students, because it's the official docs for the library, so there isn't going to be a better resource for them.
Yeah. Okay. So they're not expected to like remember all this by like through raw memory.
Yeah, no, and that's also something I say constantly. You know, I mean, man, I have a pretty bad memory a lot of the times. I forget things constantly. You know, I think it's funny that I am a programmer at times, but I enjoy it, you know, so I get by. But I get by utilizing documentation and utilizing, you know, taking lots of notes and other things like that. And I recommend the same thing to the students, because yeah, it's crazy. You know, you know, you're learning all these different libraries, and it's like, okay, you know, I'm going to learn this one for 3 months, then I'm going to walk away for like 2 weeks and forget everything I learned, you know. So you don't want to focus on the memorization. That's what I always say. Do not focus on the memorization. Focus on the deeper understanding of the concepts, because the bottom line is is that all of us here, we're going to play around with Pygame for a while, and then maybe in the future, we're going to move on. We're going to work with a different game engine, and you're going to have to use different functions and other things to get things done. But game engines are game engines. Programming languages are programming languages. They all have quite a lot of things in common. So if you can, I'm losing my train of thought. If you can, just total. The other guy left, and I just lost my train of thought. Essentially, all I was getting at though was don't focus on memorization. Isn't that funny? Yeah, don't focus on memorization. Focus on the deeper understanding of concepts and provide all of the resources you need, or all of the resources that the students need, so that they have lots to look through.
Yeah, all right, that's understandable.
Yeah. So, I know I've talked everybody else out of here. I appreciate you sticking around. Just trying to make my last points. Again, as far as the whole course goes, the whole library and everything, it's a lot of fun. It really is, and it kind of goes just like earlier courses in Python. I'm showing you guys like the absolute maximum what you can do, but in many classes you're going to have to go at a very slow pace. You're going to have to take your time and explain things over and over again. In other classes you might just spend a lot of time remaking that bouncing ball code, just because students just don't really get it. So again, I guess that's all I'm getting at is I think there's a lot of people that feel intimidated by the Pygame course, but it's a lot of fun. It really is. I find it a whole lot more fun than teaching the other Python courses, just because there's so many more opportunities for projects we can do, and students usually enjoy it a lot. So
yeah,
anyways.
I do feel like this course can be somewhat like a bit of a high learning curve, but in the end it has like a high reward payoff. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah, it's there's no doubt there's some challenges, but that's again why I say, like, focus on the big takeaways and go at the pace that feels best for your class. Big takeaways are again like X and Y coordinate systems, drawing shapes and images, and then getting into animations. And even with the animations, you can use the tools I've made and other things, and you can make that pretty simple too, just so that they have the ability to create some animations with the engine and actually make some games. It's there's challenges in it, but again, it's a cool course because it teaches a lot more than just the game development. It gets into actual like computer graphics, and that's a big valuable thing too. So I try and advertise that to parents and other things, so that they know that we're not just sitting around making video games, that we're actually learning some really valuable skills, and it's challenging. So
yeah. Yeah, honestly, I think that's all I got.
cool. All right, man. Well, I appreciate you sticking around through the whole thing and asking questions. If you ever have any other questions or you need anything else from me, always just send me a message. I'm usually around, so always happy to answer.
All right.
Have a good one.
Yeah, you too.